Hey everybody, welcome to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, visionrecordingstudios.com, and here on my YouTube channel. And today we're going to do another Universal Audio plugin series look today at the new Marshall 1959 Super Lead Plexi head, which just came out this month, meaning May 2015. Or I think it may have been the end of April. But anyhow, came out in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I will say this is probably the best guitar amp sim plugin that I've probably ever used. And up until recently, over the last year or so, I've used many different companies' guitar amp sims, because I do a lot of music recording other artists, obviously, in my studio, but I also do a lot of music, writing music for television and film. And one of the things that makes that a challenge is you got to be able to turn out things very quickly. And in the past, I've always used, amps, real cabinets, real microphones, which is, kind of a pain setting all that stuff up all the time. And I tried to get into some amp sims all the way back in the days of working with Line 6 Pod Farm and the Avid 11 rack and Guitar Rig and all the other ones that are out there. And there's lots of them. And I gotta say that for the most part, I'm never been a big fan of amp simulator plugins, because they never seem to really capture, especially for rock music or for heavy rock music, never seem to capture the real grind and grit and growl, if you will, of a real tube amp. They just never do. There's been many emulations of different types of Marshalls, and they never sound quite right. I guess they're okay, and they'll do the job for demos and for things like that. But for real records, I just never really thought they were the real deal. There was too much of a gap between the real sound and the plugins. Up until Universal Audio started getting into guitar amp sims, with working with Softtube, about maybe a year or so ago with the I think it was called Softtube Amp Room. And again, that was, I think, one of their first, Universal Audio's first guitar amp plugins. And again, not bad, but not thrilled. I have it, used it, not too great. Recently, they've put out the Chandler plugin, which we'll do a review on at another time. They put out the Angle plugin, guitar amp. Then most recently, prior to this Marshall, the Friedman collection, which is amazing. And now the Marshall's 59 Super Lead. And I will tell you that those 4 guitar amp simulator plugins are the best I've ever used. So much so that now I'm using the Friedman and now this Marshall on all my commercial work for television and film. They sound absolutely authentic, as good as any tube amp I've ever used, a real tube amp. And so now you have this in a plugin. So let's take a quick look at this. And as everyone knows, if you like my Universal Audio reviews, I try to do a little history lesson and facts for each plugin that we're going to look at. So this will be quick, and then we're going to jump into the DAW, and we're going to experiment with some sounds here, because that's really what you care about. But released in 2015 on the UAD2 platform, working with Marshall's Chris George and famous recording engineer Tony Platt, who recorded AC/DC's Back in Black and Highway to Hell. So you want to get, great authentic guitar tones in a plugin. You want to talk to one of the most famous recording engineers who recorded some of the best rock records ever made, and that's Tony Platt. And working again with Marshall's Chris George, on this particular plugin. This is based on a 1959 Super Lead Plexi from Marshall's own museum. So this is not any old 59 Super Lead that some famous musician had. This is actually the Super Lead that came out of Marshall's own museum, meaning this is a pristine Super Lead amplifier that sounds as good as the day that it was built. So this was not just any old 59 Super Lead pulled out of some recording studio. This is the one from Marshall's own amp museum. So we got the best of the best of all the Plexis that are still left in existence. The amp, it's a 1959, but the amp was actually built in 1967, believe it or not. The 1959 Plexi has been used on some of the most famous guitar players in the 1960s and 70s. It is on countless rock and roll records. So if you were in rock music in the 60s and 70s, the most famous, guitar players in the world have used and owned a 59 Plexi. And this amp is considered to be the holy grail of guitar amplifiers, especially for rock music. They're very sought after, very difficult to find ones in really good shape. And if you can find them, they're very expensive. And this is like the amp of amps in the guitar, in the rock world of guitar amplifiers. This is the amp to own, and now it's in a plug-in format. So let's go over to the DAW here and let's take a look. So what I did was, I recorded a little piece of music here with some drums from Easy Drummer, a bass guitar, and a couple of guitar tracks. And I recorded this using the Universal Audio Apollo and using their console software to record the dry signal. So one of the good things about Universal Audio, if you have a system, is that whenever you buy a Universal Audio interface, if you're recording through an interface, a Universal Audio interface, is you have what's called the console software. And the console software allows you to record through your plugins with no latency. And what's great about that is you not only can you record through your plugins, but you can record, and you can either record the tone, print it to tape, so to speak, record the tones you're actually hearing into the DAW, or you can just monitor the tone by clicking on the insert effects button here. And what that's going to do, it's going to let you monitor whatever you set up for your recording chain, but just going to record a dry signal into your DAW. And then you can add the plugins and change the tone after the fact, which is exactly what I did here for demonstration purposes. So for this tutorial, I don't have to sit here with a guitar in my hand and play through the million of presets, and it would just make it a little bit clunky to do. So I wanted to record the signal dry, and then we'll add the Marshall and add and go through some of the presets, and you can hear the different tones for yourself. So if you're recording through a Universal Audio Apollo interface, you have this ability to do this. And what I did is I just set up my guitar chain. Again, this was recorded dry, but just to show you what my guitar chain was, I used the Marshall Plexi here, which we're going to look at in a minute. And I also used, prior to that, I monitored through a Neve 88RS console, but I didn't record this tone. I just monitored it. So I was playing around with it, and I added a little bit of reverb, which is really cool. So when I was monitoring, I was hearing a really nice, thick, rich, warm guitar tone with some space around it. Okay. And then I recorded that into using the UAD monitor feature, just monitored the effects, didn't record them, onto 2 dry tracks. So first, and you'll see here, on guitar dry 1, I'll shut off the insert so you can just hear the 2 guitars by themselves. So if I just, all I did is I played a piece of music and just played it twice. So here's the 2 guitar tracks that I played that are now dry, so you can hear there's no effects on them. Okay, so we have a dry guitar sound, obviously. Okay, so I monitored it through the Apollo, but I just recorded it dry. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to, we'll just play with the first guitar track for now. And I'm going to open up the Marshall, and we're going to turn it on. And let's take a walk through the plugin before we get into some sounds. So here is the 1959 Super Lead. It's a pretty simple amp to use. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to it. It wasn't a multi-channel, 4-channel amps and stuff like they have today. But over here you have an on-off switch with an indicator light. You have a presence control. You have a bass control, a treble, a middle or mid control, which doesn't have, I guess the original one, and doesn't have the cap on the tone on the knob itself, which is kind of funny. And they just replicated what it really looks like. And then the treble control here. It's a 2-channel amp. You have volume 1 for channel 1 and volume 2 for channel 2. And what makes this amp a little unique is that you have 2 different inputs, and you have these jumper cables which allow you to patch 2 of the channel 1 and channel 2 together to create a bunch of tonal characteristics that are different from one another, which we'll look at in a few minutes. So by clicking the black patch cable, which is the guitar cable, you plug into channel 1, or you could plug into channel 2, and then you can move the jumper cables around, and like I said, we'll look at that in a few minutes on how that kind of works. So the differences between channel 1 and channel 2 is channel 1 tends to be a little bit more bright and a little more present. Channel 2 is a little bit more full-bodied and a little more warm. Okay, so that's kind of the lay of the land on the front of the Marshall. And then over here on the channel strip, by clicking this green piece of tape here, you get the channel strip. And what they did, and what makes this plugin amazing, is they just didn't just take one setting, put one mic in front of one cabinet, and that was the Marshall sound that you got. What they did, which is really unique, they emulated three different pairs or three different settings of microphones on a 1964 by 12 cabinet. Now the cabinet that they used was a 4 by 12 loaded with G12H 30s. It wasn't an original cabinet from the 60s because the speakers, after all the years of being used, were kind of worn out and such. So they picked a newer style cabinet with some just broken in speakers. So the cabinet itself in this plugin is not from the period. Which doesn't matter, but just so you know that. And what they did is they mic'd up that cabinet with three different sets of microphones. And we could see that over here. They had a dynamic set of microphones, an FET set of microphones, and a set of valves. So the dynamic means that all three, they use dynamic mics and they use FET mics and tube mics. Okay. So up top here, we have a main equalization, kind of a main equalizer, low and high controls. We have a main output volume here. We have the three different sets of microphone selector. So then down here we have the three microphones that were used for that particular set. So in this case, the dynamics, they had a 57, a 609, and an 87. And I'll tell you what those microphones are in a second. We have a pan control for each one of those microphones. Okay, one's a room mic. You have two mics on the cabinet, and then the third one over to the right's a room mic. Okay, and then you're able to blend the mic together, which is amazing. You can pan them, you can blend them together, you can turn them on and off, you can do all that stuff, which is great. Okay, so let me just tell you about the microphones themselves. So on the dynamic setting, you have three microphones. You have a 57, which is an SM57. You have a 609, which is a Sennheiser E609. And then the room mic was an 87, which is a Neumann U87. On the FET, you have a 70 a Josephine, I hope I'm saying that right, E22 mic. We had a U87 mic, and then we had the Coles 4038 mic for the room mic. And then on the tube mics, the valves, we have a Neumann U67 for mics 1 and 2. So there were two Neumann U67s, and then an AKG C12 for the room mic. Okay, so and these sound vastly different from each other, and we're going to play with that in a second. So the amp itself the plugin is really simple to use. Okay, you pop it on your channel on your dry signal, and again, this is great for if you're an engineer or producer who records actual guitar players in your studio and you use real amps and such. One of the things you can do here is you can use this as kind of a reamping plugin. When you're recording a guitar player live in your studio, you can record both the recorded tone of the amp or whatever amp you're using and cabinet you're using at the time, and you can split that signal and bring a dry signal into your DAW and pop this plugin on afterwards, which is what we're going to do, even if you're not using an Apollo Universal Audio Apollo interface. And this is also great for just mixing guys who get tracks and sessions sent from people. A lot of times I get tracks where I get a dry DI guitar. And that's really great to be able to do this. Or again, if you're producing your own music and you're a guitar player, a musician, and you're not really sure what kind of guitar tone you're going to want in the very end, you can just, again, you can pop this on if you're using an Apollo interface, and you can monitor, just a stock tone, just pick something that sounds decent. Again, don't commit, record it, dry, and then just use this afterwards. So it's really great. It can be used in a wide variety of ways. It's not just you have to keep the tone that you started with when you were recording, if that makes sense. So let's go through this. So and also what they also have here, we're going to start with the presets. They got a huge amount of presets here, and again, all these presets were developed by Tony Platt. In the creation of this. This is the guy that's recorded, like I said, some of the biggest rock records ever made. So, these presets are amazing, and we'll play with the presets, but a lot of times I'm finding I'm picking a preset and just rolling with it because it sounds so good. So the first one is just a big and roomy, which is on the FET setting. Okay, so let's big and room FET. How come that's done? Okay. Rock rhythm dynamic. So it moved over to the dynamic setting. And what we're going to do is we're just going to play back. I already looped this piece of music. Let's just kind of bring it back to the beginning here. And now I have the Marshall on only one of these channels here, and it's panned right up the middle, so you can kind of hear the whole piece of music here. Okay, that's on input 1. Here's input 2. So right straight away you can hear that input 2 is much darker and more warm and full body than channel 1. So you have, just by switching from channel 1 to channel 2, you get a major tonal difference without changing any of the microphone settings. So here's just the 57 on this particular preset. And you can pan it. So if you were just going to use one microphone, don't know why you would do that, but if you chose to, you could just pan that microphone up the middle. If you're going to use both mics, you could pan one hard left and one hard right. So that's what just the 57 sounds like. The 609, and then the 87. Here's the room mic. So you can kind of blend them together. It's kind of a solo. Now you can even adjust the EQ. So you can even play with the EQ settings as well. Let's pick another preset here. That's the FET settings, different microphones compared to the dynamic that we just listened to. The valve settings. So the valve settings are usually going to be a little bit darker. A little bit more warm. You know, they're tube mics. That's the difference. So you can see right out of the gate, and I'll go through all these presets while we're playing this, just so you can see what a difference in variety of tone that you have here, which is really, really amazing. So let's cycle through all the presets quickly. I'll just won't talk. I'll just keep cycling through them. Oops. Okay, so just by going through half the presets only plugged into channel 1, you can see the different tonal possibilities here, right? So now that's just plugging into channel 1. You can still take all those presets and tweak them by moving the patch cable around to the different inputs. Okay, so that's what makes this great. Now, one of the other unique things about this Marshall, and one of the most commonly used things to do with this when you're let's see, how do we bring up the patch here? You can jumper the cables together. I forget how the hell they did this here. Okay, double click. Okay, so one of the things is you can now jumper the two channels together. So you plugged into channel 1, and then you could take a short patch cable, and this was done all the time with these amps, and you'd blend the two channels together. So it's actually now putting two channels into play with this little jumper cable, and by clicking, you can do the combination of, just by clicking on the jumper cable, you can change the way it's plugged in together, which is pretty cool. So that's another way to use this, and that's a very common way to use this. And again, so you can now use the same preset, which we're on the dynamic preset, and you can just switch the way these jumpers are patched in along with the way your guitar's plugged directly into the amp. And again, it just gives you more tonal possibilities. Can use the so you can use volume 1, the channel 1, which is a little bit more brighter than channel 2, and you can kind of blend the two together. And then you can do that in conjunction with the blending of the different microphones. So the tonal possibilities here are really endless. I mean, it's almost too much in a way because it gets crazy. What I tend to use this for, or the way I've been using it since I've gotten the plugin, is I've just been picking a preset, to be completely honest, because the presets are so good that I usually like to commit to a guitar tone, pretty much right out of the gate. So I don't get too crazy with it, but I just wanted to show you some of the possibilities, because some guys, they want to tweak this thing to death, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's a way to do it. So, I mean, again, it's just amazing how great this sounds. And if you just double click the jumper, it will go away. Just 2-click on it, and there it is. Love the way that sounds. Okay, now one other way I would use this is, so say we like that sound, we love that sound on the first guitar. Sounds great, right? So let's close the plugin. Now I have 2 guitar tracks here that were recorded twice. Again, they're both dry. They were both dry. I'm going to pan this one, hard left. And then I'm going to drop another instance of this Marshall on. I'm going to pan it hard right. I'm going to pick a little bit of a different tonal, possibility here. So now we're on channel 2, and maybe I'm going to pick a different preset. So that was a dynamic preset. Maybe I'll pick I don't know, a FET preset, different set of microphones, and blend them together. That's the FET on the right side. Or maybe some valve mics, a little darker, a little warmer. So that's another way to use this, is you can now pan guitars hard left and right, pick two different types of settings and blend them together. So there's many other possibilities tonal wise that you can use here. I didn't want to make this video way too long. I just wanted to show you the basic get up and go. Here's how you use it. It's a very simple plugin. It sounds absolutely amazing. It is probably the best guitar amp product I've seen for guitar amp simulators. And I'm going to use this all the time, next to maybe the Friedman plugin, which we'll do a review on maybe next week, which is amazing as well. With that, it's a little bit more fully featured, couple different amps, a lot more settings. But this is just a straight ahead, simple amp, 3 sets of microphones. All the presets sound amazing. Record the stuff dry, or through your Apollo interface, or if you don't have an Apollo interface and you're recording guitars, try to split the signal and record a DI on your guitar, and use a plugin like this, and you can get that nice, expensive, classic Marshall sounds at pennies on the dollar. So this is a wonderful plugin. I highly recommend it to anyone who records guitars, mixes guitars, guitar players. Great plugin. And I think as of the recording of this video, I think this plugin's around $199. This is May 2015, and it's worth every single penny. Every single penny. If you want that Marshall sounds, this is the plugin to have. And this is the holy grail of the Marshall sounds. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you got a kind of an inside look to this, and I hope you found it informative. For more mixing tips, tricks, concepts, techniques, and training, head over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and check out the Made Easy series, and now the new Quick Mix series, which is really popular, which was just launched this month, May 2015. And for any more information on myself and my mixing and mastering services, you can head over to visionrecordingstudios.com and check out all the stuff I have there. A lot of free content, cool stuff on our blog. Until next time with the next plugin review, this is David Vignola from homerecordingmadeeasy.com and visionrecordingstudios.com. And I will talk to you guys all soon. Take care.